Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. So my name's Dominic Golding. I think many of you know me already. I'm the Centre Director for the Nantucket Project Centre, which is what WPI calls us, even though we don't really have any bricks and mortar. As many of you may know, we've been doing projects on the island. This is our 4th year now. We've done... how many projects have we done? 41, I think, when we finished these projects today. We've had 60-odd students that have been here. 21 projects. We've had about 60-odd students been here over the last 4 years. And we have a long-term commitment to continue to do this. It's been a very successful venture so far. We actually have about 30 project centres around the world. We've conducted 3,000 projects in the last 36 years in various parts, everywhere from Bangkok to London to Nantucket. And we're opening project centres actually this year in India, New Zealand, Moscow, Albania. We've got more students that want to go off and do these kinds of things than we have spots for. So it is a competitive program, but we're trying to create as many spots as we can to meet the need. And so actually next year we're going to be increasing the number of students on island to 24, and there will be 2 advisors rather than me on my lonesome. So anyway, to get going for today, I'm going to try and stay on track so people that want to come for particular presentations can, and then some may want to leave and others will arrive. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first team. They have been working with Housing Nantucket with Anne Kusper and Milan Setkoff. And they're going to talk today about optimising affordable housing on Nantucket. And the team is Alex, Casey, and Ethan. So they can come over here and do their stuff. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming down to see our presentation. This is the first of the WPI project presentations. I'm Alex Kafantis, Ethan Forbes, and Casey Hayes. And this is our project, Optimizing Affordable Housing on Nantucket. As many of you know, affordable housing options on the island are very limited. The median household on Nantucket sells for just over $1 million, while the average home sells for multiple millions, outstripping the average island income. This makes it difficult for vital members of the community, such as teachers and those in the service industry, to afford their own homes. The high cost of goods and energy on the island only adds to the issue. This is a graph comparing the average price of a home on Nantucket with one on the mainland. As you can see, in recent years, the disparity has grown at an alarming rate. And in 2010, the average Nantucket home cost nearly $1.5 million more than the average mainland home. Housing Nantucket is a nonprofit 501c3 organization dedicated to providing safe, affordable housing to year-round island residents earning less than 150% of the Nantucket income, median income. They currently manage 27 rental units. Housing can be made significantly more affordable by taking advantage of energy-saving technologies and practices. This is especially important on Nantucket, which suffers from high energy prices. Housing Nantucket recently had their rental units audited, 2 of which are already LEED certified. Housing Nantucket also strives to use energy-saving technologies where applicable. Housing Nantucket is a rapidly expanding organization, and as such is in the process of acquiring this building here on Clifford Street, which will be moved to its new site in January and will be repurposed as their new resource center. During our time here, we managed to expand the capabilities and improve upon Housing Nantucket's existing property database. We also evaluated tenant knowledge and behavior with respect to energy efficiency and developed outreach materials to help them save more money. Finally, we evaluated possible site options and researched applicable energy-saving technologies for use at the Resource Center. Using Microsoft Access, we were able to create a new database for Housing Nantucket. This new database is easier to use and enforces spelling and data consistency to create a clean, easy-to-use database. It will exist as a single file hosted on Housing Nantucket's network so that multiple computers can access it at once and edit it as well without interference. We even created a search form to make desired information easier to find, and it can be found with practically any search criteria.
We conducted a survey of Housing Nantucket tenants in order to assess their energy-saving attitudes and behaviors, as well as assess ways we can improve upon these. The survey was developed in conjunction with Housing Nantucket staff, Professor Dominic Golding and Peter Morrison. The finalized version of the survey contained 3 sections, one on the tenant's home, their behavior, and on the energy audit. All Nantucket mail goes off-island, therefore we chose to distribute and collect the surveys by hand to expedite the process. Overall, after multiple rounds of collection, we managed to get 18 surveys, or a 66% response rate. Overall, tenants were very satisfied with Housing Nantucket and their housing. 89% of tenants reported positive or neutral responses that Housing Nantucket meets their needs, and over 3/4 of the tenants responded that they are satisfied or neutral with their current housing. We recommend that Housing Nantucket conduct an annual satisfaction survey to better fit the needs of their tenants. All of Housing Nantucket's 27 rental properties had an energy audit conducted, and there were no negative responses from this audit. 50% of the tenants reported that they saw some savings from the audit, and 50% reported that their bill is the same. However, some of the work with the audits was done very recently, so perhaps these tenants don't have enough time to fully realize their savings. 25% of the tenants reported very significant savings. One such tenant gave us a copy of their energy bill, which displays the last 13 months of energy usage. They had the energy audit and associated work completed in January 2012, and we were able to calculate from this data that they have an estimated 47% savings on their energy bill. Quite impressive. We recommend that Housing Nantucket have any futurely acquired buildings energy audited, as it is a proven way to reduce energy in the home. Our project team was still able to find ways in which tenants could save money. Through our survey, 95% of tenants reported that there is some type of drafts in their home, with the majority of these located around windows and doors. This problem has an easy solution, which is weather stripping. Weather stripping is a cheap and effective way to reduce drafts in the home and cutting heat loss, and it is available at the Marine Home Center for approximately 60 cents per foot. Tenants are reported being quite conservative with their heating, with 72% of the tenants saying that they keep their heat at or below 65 degrees Fahrenheit all the time. Additionally, most tenants reported that they turn their heat down at night and also when they're not there during the day. Not all tenants were as energy conservatious when it came to electronics. As you can see here, quite a number of tenants reported that they unplug and turn off their electronics when they're not in use, but an equal number reported that they never do, leaving them on. Additionally, over 50% of the tenants reported that they keep their cable boxes on when they're not watching television. Cable boxes are significant users of electricity in the modern home, and a typical cable box with a digital video recorder actually uses more energy than a brand new energy-certified refrigerator. So there clearly are ways that tenants can improve and learn more about energy efficiency. One of these ways is with smart power strips. 89% of tenants reported not using smart power strips. These devices are a great, effective way to reduce energy use of electronic devices. They automatically regulate which devices are on and off and will turn off those that aren't needed. They're available for as little as $30 and are a great investment for tenants to make. Many tenants are unaware of other energy-saving technologies. One of these is low-flow faucets. 61% of tenants reported not using low-flow faucets. Some people complain that the pressure of these units isn't quite as good, but there are aerating models out there that have equal pressure with greatly reduced water usage. Overall, we from the survey discovered that the tenants could learn more about energy-saving technologies, and there are drafts in the home. Therefore, we recommend that Housing Nantucket purchase energy-saving technologies such as CFL light bulbs and weather stripping to provide to their tenants, promoting greater energy efficiency amongst the entire organization. Additionally, Housing Nantucket should consider replacing future appliances with Energy Star certified products and other fixtures in the home, such as faucets with the energy efficient models. Overall, tenants were very grateful for the affordable housing opportunities on the island that let them stay on Nantucket.
We created a pamphlet to educate tenants in ways which they can save even more energy. The pamphlet expands upon our findings and makes recommendations based on trends we noticed in the survey responses. We focused on making the pamphlet attractive and easy to understand, and included a link and quick response code to our accompanying web article. The web article goes more in depth than the pamphlet and includes additional facts and figures for those who might be interested. An energy-saving pamphlet could have benefits for the whole island. If a more generalized version were distributed to seasonal renters, it could work to dramatically reduce the extreme surge in energy usage during the summer months. Recycling guidelines are already provided to these seasonal renters, so why not include a pamphlet on energy-saving practices and how they can benefit the island?
After interviews with Housing Nantucket staff and the assessment of Housing Nantucket's newly proposed office building, we were able to obtain a list of recommendations in which the organization could optimize the energy efficiency of the building. We were also able to pinpoint areas of trouble, such as water damage around exterior doors, which is an indication of poor sealing from the outside environment. This can easily be remedied with solutions such as weather stripping. This is just one of the many suggestions we feel could benefit the Clifford House. The existing floor plans of the Clifford House were created with a residential layout in mind and were not suitable for use as an office. In order to solve this issue, we proposed the following redesign of the floor plans. The first floor of the building will be completely handicap accessible and include a reception area as well as a conference room for meeting with Housing Nantucket tenants and the Housing Nantucket board. It will also include 2 office spaces, one used for Housing Nantucket and another which could possibly be rented out to other nonprofit organizations on the island. The second floor of the building, which was originally 4 bedrooms, There we go. All right, yeah. So the second floor of the building, which will consist of four rooms, one will be used for Housing Nantucket office and 3 other rented office spaces. All right. The new resource center should include insulated concrete form foundation, which will save considerable energy and prevent mold. This will incur higher costs up front, as well as the prevention of mold. This will incur higher costs up front, which will eventually be paid off by increased energy efficiency. The inclusion of a 3.5 kilowatt photovoltaic system will allow the office to produce 18% of its energy needs. This will have an expected 25-year lifetime and will pay for itself over these 25 years, along with paying back nearly $15,000. A PV system would provide the building with $1,000 in savings per year for an installation cost of $20,000. This system will have paid for itself in 10 years, as well as this system will have paid for itself after 10 years due to the energy bill savings and the full payment of the 10-year incentive plan. All existing lighting in the building should be switched over to CFL light bulbs, as they will provide a 78% reduction in energy usage over incandescent bulbs and a savings of $143 a year. The building should also incorporate low-flow fixtures and toilets in order to reduce water usage, as well as the installation of programmable thermostats, which will allow the office to regulate temperatures when there's no one in the building. We also propose that the building should be audited by a professional in order to address the issues of missing weather stripping and installation, as well as providing subsidized costs for replacement of CFL light bulbs and other technologies. Given the research we have conducted, we believe that Housing Nantucket will be able to reach its goal of Energy Star certification through the implementation of our proposed technologies. We found that just by installing a 3.5 kilowatt solar system alone would exceed the Energy Star requirements of 15% energy reduction. The building's total reduction could be reduced by the increasing further use of other proposed technologies. By acquiring this certification, Housing Nantucket will be able to show its commitment to energy certification, commitment to energy efficiency. This will be beneficial, increasing appeal to donors to support green practices, as well as opening up grant opportunities only available for energy-certified buildings. Many of the technologies implemented in order to reach certification will also improve the overall quality of the building's environment.
We want to thank you for coming and watching our presentation, and for more information, you can visit housingnantucket.org.
Thanks.
Any questions? Yep.
Yeah.
Is this in reference to the Energy Star reduction of 15%?
We use energy as a blanket term to refer to both because they are both different forms of energy. Yes.
Yes.
I understand that National Grid actually provides some of these products and services at their expense, is that correct?
Yes, after the audits, they replaced most of the lights in the rental properties with CFLs. Some of them had already been replaced with less energy efficient ones. I don't know if they broke or if the tenants weren't satisfied with them, but they do eventually burn out. They have about a 7 to 10 year lifespan, so it's still a good idea to have those to be replaced.
Yeah, all the work conducted by the National Grid audits is actually subsidized work. So they'll come in, they'll assess your property, they'll make the changes, and then they'll offer you incentives on those changes to kind of reduce the overall cost of them.
Yep, Peter?
You mentioned the pamphlet that you prepared that's targeted toward housing Nantucket renters. Could you talk a bit about how that might be more broadly applicable to the renter population on Nantucket generally? Have you thought about preparing a version of that for that larger population?
We have actually. As I mentioned earlier, it would be a great idea to provide a similar but more generalized pamphlet to seasonal renters to help reduce the serious surge in energy usage that occurs with the booming population in the summer months. And like I was saying, since they're already provided a pamphlet on instructions on how to recycle responsibly on the island, it would not be a huge detriment to them to be able to read more about energy saving. We do actually have a preliminary version, which is more generalized and does not include Housing Nantucket branding.
The rental agency or group is on the island provide the trash guidelines. I can talk to them, or should we talk to them about doing their input and materials for together?
We think it would definitely be beneficial, and it's worth at the very least considering, yes.
And other than if you want to say any words that will be involved with the group
What? I just got
program in general.
Sure.
It's okay.
I mean, because my executive director, it's okay.
Yeah.
There, just here.
Sure, go.
I know, I just want to
We
say
got the
thank
meeting
you. It
first.
was
Yeah.
really great working with you guys, and hi everyone, I'm Ann Cuspa, Executive Director at Housing Nantucket. This was such a great opportunity for us. It was the first time that I've worked with students at the organization, and you really helped us out a lot, and I was really honored and grateful, A, to get accepted, for you to be interested in our project, and I think that the work that you've done, it'll help our tenants to stay warm, and it'll just help people be happier, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So our next group has been working with the Nantucket or Town Energy Office. Lauren Sinatra is the liaison for the town who runs that office. I don't see Lauren here yet, but I hope she'll be here shortly. We've actually done a number of energy-related projects on the island over the years. Obviously, energy is a particular issue on the island, given the cost of electricity and the cost of importing energy of one sort or another, whether it's gas or petroleum or whatever. So I'm sure that other energy projects will be of concern in the future. This project was really looking, building on actually a previous question on the National Grid audits. It was building on the audits that have been done for many residential homes on the island. As the team will explain, this is a relatively new phenomenon for Nantucket, even though you've all been paying a surcharge to National Grid. Prior to this year, those energy audits had not been conducted on the island just because of the logistics of arranging them. And Lauren has been pushing, been basically organising the program in order to get audits on island, and she was very keen to know how that program was being received by the residents that had participated in the program, as well as by those that hadn't but might know about it, and what could be done to get them to actually sign up and have an energy audit done. So without stealing the thunder of the energy team, I will just hand this over to them. And the title of their presentation today is Evaluation of the Awareness and Effectiveness of the Mass Save Program on Nantucket. And it's Mike Andres, Courtney Carroll, and Ari Hopkinson. The floor's yours.
I'm Ari.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Courtney. So for the past 14 weeks, we have been working on a project to assess the Mass Save Home Energy Assessment Program, and the past 7 weeks have been spent here on island collecting data and working with our sponsor, Lawrence Sinatra, who's the Energy Program and Outreach Coordinator for the Town of Nantucket Energy Office. So today our presentation will go through some overall background information, our methods of collecting data, and then our findings, and finally some recommendations we have to improve the program. Overall, our project goal was to assess the Mass Save Home Energy Assessment Program and provide recommendations to improve program satisfaction, impact of the program, and also overall awareness.
The Mass Save program is a statewide initiative started in 1980, sponsored by 9 Massachusetts gas and electric utilities. One of the services provided by the program is a home energy assessment, or HEA. During a home assessment, a Mass Save energy specialist will come into a home and evaluate the home's current energy usage, provide energy efficient products, and then provide a custom list of energy saving recommendations. Since Mass Save is a statewide initiative, the program covers the entire state, including islands off the coast like Nantucket. The program is especially valuable to Nantucket residents due to the extremely high cost of electricity. Since National Grid provides electricity to the island through 2 submarine cables, they are responsible for providing audits on island. But instead of performing them themselves, they actually contract the work out to a company called Conservation Services Group, who is in turn performing the audits for them. So it wasn't until January of 2012 that with the help of the Town Energy Office, CSG was able to create a system that allowed island residents to receive audits more easily. This new system clumped assessments together into designated audit weeks, which allowed auditors to come from the mainland and effectively do a lot of assessments at once. And so far, there have been scheduled to do quarterly audits, so 4 times a year, and there have been 3, one in January, April, and November of this year. So in total, around 175 homes have been assessed, which is approximately 5% of the total households on the island.
So the means by which we collected data and other information can be separated into 3 categories. The first was through an in-depth analysis of past energy conservation programs, conservation strategies, and marketing techniques, and an extensive literature review. We also interviewed key individuals such as our sponsor, Lawrence Sinatra, employees at CSG and National Grid, and as well as Mass Save auditors. The purpose of this was to gain a better knowledge of past program implementation and the facilitation of Mass Save on Nantucket. The second phase of data collection was to survey and interview residents who had received a home energy assessment during one of the past 3 audit weeks. From this, we gained insight into the audit procedure, products and recommendations, and overall satisfaction. Finally, we surveyed a sample of the island residents. The purpose of this survey was to determine public awareness, successful marketing strategies, and to determine and to gauge, the importance of energy conservation on Nantucket.
So for our program participant survey, we interviewed 39 Nantucket residents who had had home energy assessments in the past year. 9 from January, 7 from April, and 23 from November. Of these 39, 36 were homeowners and 3 were renters. Our survey revealed that the top 2 reasons why residents had signed up to have an assessment were to save money and to reduce energy. Additionally, we asked what participants had expected to gain from having an assessment, and the majority expected to gain recommendations to help improve their home's energy efficiency, followed by saving money. Next, participants were asked to rate how engaging, knowledgeable, and thorough their auditors were on a scale of 1 to 5. Overall, auditors received very high marks, as shown by the average scores on white in the graph. In total, there were 38 recommendations given during audit week, with multiple recommendations allowed per resident. This table shows the recommendations given, the recommendations that participants have already implemented, and recommendations that residents plan to implement in the future. The recommendations in bold are those that participants did not plan to implement in the future, which account for about 50% of the recommendations given during this time. There are 4 energy-saving products given out during home energy assessments: compact fluorescent light bulbs, programmable thermostats, low-flow shower heads, and faucet aerators. This graph shows the number of participants that received each item in blue, the number of participants who did not receive each item in red, and the number of participants who received each item but were not installed in light blue. Thermostats are, excuse me, thermostats require installation. Thermostats require installation, but the majority of residents who received thermostats did not have them installed, and this is because of time constraints and installation that required an electrician. Additionally, 27 participants independently stated that they took out some of their compact fluorescents after having the assessment and replaced them with their old incandescents. 100% of people said that they would recommend this program to a family or friend, which is great. And additionally, 75% had already recommended the program, including some residents we spoke to that had just had their assessment a few days earlier. We asked participants to rate their overall satisfaction with the program, and generally they were very satisfied and felt that the audit was worth their time commitment, as shown by the average scores given in white on the graph. Finally, we asked participants to give recommendations for the program, and a majority of participants hope to increase marketing and program awareness so that others could take advantage of this great program, and also to provide more information during the assessment. Other recommendations included more of a variety of products, increasing the amount of time per audit, and more follow-up following their assessment. We tried to determine how participants had heard about the program, and overall, word of mouth was the most popular answer, followed by mailing inserts and newspaper advertisements. And finally, we asked participants if they were aware that they were paying a surcharge in their electricity bill for energy efficiency programs like the Mass Save program in their energy bill. And 56% were not aware, even though they had had an assessment. And that concludes the findings from our participant survey.
For our general population survey, we surveyed 97 island residents, of which 92 were year-round residents and 5 were seasonal. 73 were homeowners and the other 24 rented. During the survey, residents were asked to read a series of statements and rate how much they agreed or disagreed with each, and the distribution can see above. Overall, this graph tells us that energy conservation is very important to island residents. Residents were also asked what would most motivate them to make energy efficiency improvements in their home, and 46% said saving money, while 22% identified to save energy. They were all also asked if in the future if they'd be interested in having a home energy assessment, and out of 97 residents, only 6 said that they would not be interested. Additionally, 68% of the general population surveyed were unaware that they are currently paying a surcharge in their electric bill for energy efficiency programs. 47 of the 97 had heard of a no-cost home energy assessment program, and when asked what names and organizations they associated with the program, 47% identified National Grid, while 36% did not know, and the remaining 17% identified other organizations such as CSG or the Town Energy Office. Out of the 97, 34% knew that there was a person in the Town Energy Office that could help them sign up for an assessment, which is part of Lauren Sinatra's job, one of the things she offers. And finally, we found different marketing avenues and techniques. The graph on the left shows how residents identified they normally learn about community events, and the graph on the right shows how residents had learned about no-cost home energy assessment programs. So the differences in these graphs can be used to help utilize effective marketing techniques. And that concludes the findings from our general population survey.
From our survey results and interviews, we've developed recommendations that will help to improve the Mass Save program for the future. Our first recommendation is to develop a model that will allow one or more on-island auditors to perform assessments year-round on behalf of CSG. The current system in place limits what time island residents can sign up for audits, limits the amount of audits that can be performed at one time, and creates substantial delays between sign-up and follow-up contract work. Only about 5% of homes on Nantucket have been audited, which would justify a full-time on-island position. Additionally, having on-island auditors and follow-on contractors would bring much-needed jobs to the Nantucket community and afford year-round and seasonal residents an equal opportunity to take advantage of this program. Our second recommendation is for auditors to focus on giving clear information on product performance prior to their installation and clear instruction on their operation of these products, specifically thermostats. Our homeowner participant survey revealed that respondents had varied expectations and degrees of knowledge of energy-saving products prior to their assessment. Currently, customers aren't given information about the differences between products, specifically that CFL light bulbs have a warm-up time, whereas incandescent bulbs do not. Additionally, providing instruction on how to install and program thermostats will ensure their proper usage in the future.
So our third recommendation is to inform program participants about program procedure, program outcomes, and necessary preparations prior to having an assessment with some clear documentation. Currently, CSG will provide a brief program overview while participants are signing up for their assessment over the phone, but some participants may not remember this information, so expectations and levels of preparedness varied coming into assessments. So by providing clear documentation that outlays program expectations, outcomes, and also a list of necessary preparations going into an assessment will be really beneficial to Nantucket residents. And our fourth recommendation is to create a follow-up system that's geared to answer participant questions, as well as identify areas of the program that can be improved. So our research found that follow-up is crucial to promoting energy efficiency changes, and currently there isn't really much of a follow-up process in place, and residents were sort of unsure of who to direct their questions to following their assessment. So by having a clear follow-up system that will allow residents to direct their questions prior or after their assessment and also identify areas that can be improved will really help the program to grow in the future.
Our fifth recommendation is to have auditors leave Mass Save brochures with participants after they've finished an assessment. Word of mouth is overwhelmingly the most common way people learn about community events and programs, and 100% of all program participants said that they would recommend the program, which is something that should really be taken advantage of. And providing brochures would help to connect the bridge between potential participants and the program. Our sixth recommendation is to utilize the internet and use newspaper advertisements to reach more island residents. Residents identified, using avenues that residents identified as common ways they learn about community programs and events can help to increase awareness of the Mass Save program. Recommendation 7 is to focus on advertising that will help residents save money and save energy. Since residents identified that saving energy and saving money would be the most motivating factors to make energy efficiency improvements in their home, by highlighting money-saving opportunities, it might help encourage residents to sign up for programs like product incentives or rebates. Additionally, advertising new energy-efficient technologies that are available through the Mass Save program will help to encourage energy-conscious residents to sign up. And our final recommendation is to include more information in bills and advertisement about the surcharge that all customers are currently paying. The majority of program participants and general population are unaware that they're even paying for this program in the first place. So advertising, customer entitlement can help motivate residents to sign up for the program or utilize something that they're already paying for.
So the Mass Save program has shown its success on Nantucket through the overwhelming support for the program and participant willingness to recommend it to others. Our recommendations above, based on observations made during the duration of this project, offer the opportunity to broaden program participation and strengthen the implementation of the project in the future. Are there any questions?
Planet question. For the audiences that may be watching this later on in the film, if somebody's interested in this, what do they do next and what happens?
If someone were interested in having an assessment, we would highly recommend that they contact Lauren Sinatra at the Town of Nantucket Energy Office. Her information can be found online at the website, and she can help them sign up for an assessment and also provide them with any information that they need or answer any questions that they had. Is that?
Yeah, currently there's another audit week scheduled for March, one of the first 2 weeks in March. So right now there's a wait list. You put your name on the wait list, and then Mass Save will contact you and schedule a time for your assessment. But ideally, there will be local contractors that will be able to perform assessments throughout the year. But that's something that's still in a work in process, which is why it was our #1 recommendation. But there's still plans to keep going with the program. Any other questions? Yeah, it's a long certification process. So since there's 9 different utilities that sponsor the program, they're all responsible for providing assessments, and then they contract the work out. So either a on-island auditor could get contracted through one of the companies that performs the audits. They could get contracted through themselves, but then it's a long training process. There's a lot of hurdles to cross over, which Lauren Sinatra is working on a lot with CSG, because that does make the most sense economically and providing residents, year-round access to this program and not just 4 weeks out of the year. Yeah, that was actually one of the things that we originally set out to do, was kind of find maybe some sort of energy savings. We actually asked during the general population survey what they thought they could save having an assessment, and the average was about 20%. But since it's so varied, someone could have a really energy efficient house already and only have lights installed, or someone could have attic insulation and basement insulation. It really varies. Peter Morrison had his assessment, and this is just like a case-by-case basis, but he said from year to year, last September to this September, it's been about a 40% reduction after he changed the setting on his dehumidifier. So check your dehumidifiers when you go home. But that's one of the things, is we didn't have access to the energy saving data from National Grid since we were working with the town energy office, so we weren't able to do an analysis of the actual energy savings. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I have to remember what's on the schedule. as many of you are quite aware, I'm sure, every record that we look at these days is being digitised by someone somewhere, and the growth... No? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes. I'll try again. That's still relevant, it's just a little early. So the next presentation is actually going to be looking at the cultural corridor, the economic impact of the cultural corridor. I apologise. As many of you know, there's been a fair amount of talk in recent years recognising that cultural institutions contribute substantially to the broader economy, whether that's at the local, regional or national scale. And there have been some efforts to try and figure out how to calculate those numbers. How do you figure out what the economic impact of cultural institutions might be? This was obviously something of concern to a number of the cultural organisations on Nantucket, and so they asked a team to try and figure out what would be the economic impact of a selection of the cultural institutions on Nantucket. This was really a pilot study to see how that might be done for a small number of institutions, with the hope that at some point in the future it could be expanded to a more thorough study that would include the majority, if not all, of the cultural institutions on the island. So the next presentation, assuming I've got my order right again, is titled Analysing the Economic Impacts of Nantucket's Cultural Corridor. It was sponsored by a number of organisations on the island that are listed here. Janet Schulte from the Mariah Mitchell Association sort of headed up the activity and tried to keep everyone going in the same direction, so I appreciate her help. But there were a number of other people whom I see in the audience today who were also involved, representing the Nantucket Historical Association, the Athenaeum, the Artists Association, the Dreamland Foundation, Nantucket Visitor Services, and the Nantucket Chamber of Commerce. So John, Xavier, and Camille are going to talk to you about the economic impacts of the cultural corridor. Thank you.
So our project was on Nantucket's cultural corridor. I'm Camille, this is John, this is Xavier. The overall goal of our project was to evaluate and interpret the economic impact of cultural organizations on the overall economy in Nantucket.
All right, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So the overall project goal was to evaluate and interpret the economic impact on the overall economy in Nantucket. Today we'll be talking about some background on the cultural economy, our methodology, our findings and analysis, and our conclusions and recommendations.
So the New England Foundation for the Arts, commonly known as NEFA, they've been doing an extensive study trying to detail what these economic impacts actually are by the organizations around New England. And what they found is that New England as a whole houses about 18,000 cultural institutions, and these institutions contribute about $3.7 billion in spending to the overall economy of New England. And when you account for the indirect and induced impacts, these 18,000 organizations account for about $8.4 billion in spending. Now that direct spending of $3.7 billion is about $1 billion more than the paper manufacturing industry as a whole in New England, and also about on par with the information and data processing industry in New England. Likewise, the 53,000 jobs directly involved with cultural organizations of New England generate about 84,000 jobs as a whole around the economy in New England as a whole. In Massachusetts alone, NEFA also found that there is the most vibrant cultural economy of the 6 New England states, totaling about 59% of the total expenditure, about $2.1 billion. And when you account for the indirect and induced impacts of this spending, it's about $4.7 billion as a whole. Likewise, the 27,000 jobs directly related to the cultural institutions in Massachusetts generate about an additional 20,000 jobs or 17,000 jobs, equating to about 43,000 jobs in total.
Now, when we approached this project, or this sort of analysis for the Nantucket economy, the first thing that we wanted to do is look at past definitions for the difference of creative and cultural economy. Cultural economy is a subset category of the creative economy, whereas cultural economy includes anything that gives off some sort of cultural value. So that includes things like museums or the library or anything dealing with the arts. The next thing we wanted to do is do an analysis similar to NEFA's, which was break down the impacts as direct, indirect, and induced. And then we also used two data collection tools. And another project similar to NEFA was the Culture Data Project, which they have the CDP form. It's a form that we took and we broke it down, and I guess, we reworked it so that way it could work more to our advantage with the Nantucket's economy. And we gathered information using the 990 forms from each organization plus other financial statements to put this into our version of the CDP form. And then we also developed two survey tools, a residential survey and a visitor survey.
Initially, the group was working with those four organizations listed up top there, as well as the Dreamland Foundation. However, as some of you may know, the Dreamland Foundation has been undergoing some significant changes with regard to their organization individually. They've had significant construction and significant expenditures into the economy just in this past fiscal year. And we felt that once analyzing the composite data, that because of this significant expenditures by the Dreamland Foundation, they were too much of an outlier to accurately represent the cultural corridor as a whole. So any data that we'll be presenting from here on out will be representative of only the MMA, the Mariah Mitchell Association, the Nantucket Athenaeum, the Artists Association of Nantucket, and the Nantucket Historical Association. However, the survey evaluation tools that we developed will include all five of those organizations, as well as visitor services. Here you can see a distribution of expenses by category of the four institutions of the cultural corridor. As a whole, they spent about $8.7 million in the 2011 fiscal year, with about 42% of that, about $3.6 million, accounting for salaries and fringe. You'll also notice significant categories labeled here as additional fees and organizational expenses. What the organizational expenses are expenses that presented themselves as commonalities among all the institutions. This includes anything from advertising promotion to catering expenses to professional fees such as accountants and consultants. The additional fees are not really commonalities or expenses that presented themselves among all the organizations. Mostly they were just expenses, small clusters of expenses that applied to only one or two organizations, such as formaldehyde supply for the MMA or artist commission fees for the Art Association or collections expense for the NHA. Once the group actually analyzed the direct, indirect, and induced impacts of the four organizations, we found that the $8.7 million contributed directly to the economy ended up generating about $9.4 million of total economic impact. That is the sum of the direct, indirect, and induced impacts of the organizations. When accounting for deflation, the organization spent about $7.1 million as opposed to $5.4 million in 2003, which was an increase of about $1.5 million in that 8-year span. Now, to derive the indirect and induced impacts, the group wanted to utilize the IMPLAN model, otherwise known as the Impact for Analysis Planning model. It's a data and software tool put up by the MIG group. Once we used this model, well, it wasn't directly available to us due to monetary restrictions. It's a quite sizable fee to actually utilize the software. NEFA does have a culture count website with an application called the Impact Calculator with the IMPLAN model already embedded into that software. And what the application does, it allows users to view past economic contributions of organizations in a region of the U.S., in our case it's Nantucket, and it allows users to view the various economic impacts of these economic contributions. It also allows users to input proposed economic change, and likewise, like you can see the old impacts from 2003, we can also see the economic impacts of these proposed changes in 2011. So once the group went through this process, we found that as a whole, in 2003, the organizations contributed a total economic impact of about $7.4 million to the Nantucket economy, and in 2011, they contributed about $9.5 million. This is an increase of about $2 million in that 8-year span. Here, you can see that the IMPLAN model also broke out various employment impacts in Nantucket. And what exactly the employment impacts are is that the in-plan model where we'll take the average weekly wage of a Nantucket employee. It will look at the economic contribution proposed in the in-plan model, and it will gauge how many jobs can be supported by this proposed economic change. So we can see here that since 2003, the change in expenditure or the change in the economic contribution supports an additional 26 jobs in the Nantucket economy. And when accounting for the indirect and induced impact jobs, you can see that since 2003, the 4 institutions support an additional 30 jobs in the Nantucket economy.
So another way that we decided to analyze these cultural organizations is we asked each of them to look into their expenditures and pull out their top 20 vendors. So then that way we could look at what percentage of those were spent on island versus off island. And as Xavier previously said, these organizations spent about $8.7 million collectively in 2011, and $2 million of that went towards just these top 20 vendors alone, with 55% of that was off-island spending. And so of the 80 total vendors, 46 of them were on island, which kind of goes to stress that these organizations actually do try and use local vendors because they want to impact the community here as much as possible. However, given some circumstances, it's not always possible. 35 of those were unique. And so here's a breakdown of all those expenditures, or the top 20 vendors collectively, broken down into different categories, so like catering or legal fees and insurance utilities. And it's a percent chart. Oops, sorry. Didn't realize I was so close. So on-island spending is the orange, and then off-island is blue. Collectively, and it adds up to 100%. And then on the bottom is insurance. 97% of the insurance between all the organizations, at least with the top 20 vendors, is off-island, and that's just because there is no insurance company on island that would make it plausible for these organizations to actually keep everything here. So it is just necessary to go off-island. And then also, like using the formaldehyde example, again, supplies, sometimes supplies can't be found on island.
So here you can see a comparison of estimated on-island expenditures versus total expenditures of the 4 institutions in the corridor. What the group did here was they estimated a standard 30% of the salaries in fringe to be just direct salary paid to employees on the island. Likewise, the group also assumed that all the occupancy fees paid by the institutions on the island can also be attributed to these on-island expenditures simply because these institutions are housed on Nantucket. And furthermore, we added the on-island vendors expenditure, and we estimated that this total of about $4.8 million compared to that $8.7 million attributes to about 56% of total expenditures being spent on island. However, this is probably just the base estimate of what the on-island expenditures actually are, simply because the group did only look at the top 20 vendors of each organization, and as you move further down the list, for vendors that are not really accounted for in the top 20, a lot of these small vendors are probably located on the island. Also, for expenses such as insurance, where the organizations pay off-island locations to cover their insurance, such as health insurance or property insurance. In the case of something like health insurance, where that health insurance covers employees on the islands, it will make its way back into the Nantucket economy simply by the employees of these organizations visiting their local dentist or visiting their local doctor and things like that.
Our group created 2 surveys, a visitor survey and a resident survey, both of which were made into paper and online formats. The major purposes of these surveys were to measure the value that the public place on these cultural institutions and to calculate the amount of money spent when visiting these cultural institutions. We conducted an initial pretest for 2 days, which we discussed with the sponsors, and then drafted our final surveys. We then conducted an extended pretest to gather initial data from 28 visitor surveys and 31 resident surveys. We found that on average, visitors spent $236 on overnight accommodations and $57 on tickets to a movie or museum. Here's the last question from our visitor survey, which asks about a single admission pass to multiple cultural organizations. Part A inquires about interest and Part B deals with the pricing. We found that 78.5% of the respondents said yes, they would be interested in such a pass. The figure below shows the breakdown of responses for the price question, And we found that 52% of the respondents said that they would be willing to pay $75 to $100 for such a pass.
Here you can see a visual representation of some of the data that we've collected from the resident survey. On the left is a histogram detailing how many organizations a typical respondent to the resident survey is a member of. And we can see that from the 31 respondents who answered, about the average ended up being about 1.7 organizations for each respondent. And on the right, we can see on a Likert scale from 1 to 5, how interested the typical Nantucket resident would be in such a pass to multiple institutions, possibly called the Nantucket. And interest did seem to be pretty high among respondents, averaging a 4.3 out of 5.
So in conclusion, we have found that these cultural institutions do play a significant part in Nantucket's economy. But a more refined assessment of the on-island vendors would be needed just because we only looked at the top 20 and assumed based off of those percentages. But yeah, so that would be need to go more in depth. And then also based on our survey data, both the visitor survey and the resident survey, people do place these organizations with high respect, and they also are genuinely interested in the Nantucket.
So as the group completed their total analysis, they came up with a set of recommendations. The first being that if the institutions of the cultural corridor wish to continue this sort of analysis in the future, to keep using the tools already developed by the group, simply because they already set a foundation for this sort of analysis that hasn't really been done on Nantucket before, and it could serve as a foundation for further progress down the road for an economic analysis. Along the way, if the analysis should be instituted on a wider scale to include all the organizations on the island, the group will recommend that as a whole, the institutions of Nantucket to fund the use of the in-plan model, simply because while the group did use the impact calculator that was already embedded with the in-plan model, the institutions would gain some pretty exact numbers by using the model itself directly, and it would avoid any more estimations or any approximations in the figures that are presented in our presentation. Also, the group recommends that along the way, all the data collection tools or any inconsistencies that may present themselves within these tools be clarified and standardized, simply because if this sort of analysis should be instituted on an island-wide scale, everything should be one standard method of collecting the data, simply because it would expedite training of relevant staff to institute the sort of data collection tool and surveys on a wider scale, and also it would allow an optimization for when the groups actually do convene to put the data together in a feasible manner.
We also recommend that the participating organizations refine the survey instruments as needed to meet their needs, and we also recommend that they determine whether or not to solely distribute these surveys with SurveyMonkey or Google using handheld tablets and in-person administration.
The last thing that we would recommend to these organizations is that they sit down and discuss the proper timeline and protocol for when they want to, when and how, where they want to distribute this survey, just because it is supposed to be a collective survey. And we want all the organizations to be on the same page, so that way we can see the impacts of all of them together. And then also when they're doing it, that they try and get about 200 to 300 surveys, just so then that way, of each, so they can get a better, accurate representation of how the population feels. And then this is just a summary of some of the key figures or key numbers that we've talked about, and are there any questions or comments? Yes.
Thanks. Great report. I'm interested in the Nantucket idea, and when you asked that question, you got a response of 52% are interested, would be willing to pay in excess of $70 for a Nantucket. But what would that offer? What would they gain from that?
Actually, that was interesting, because the 4 institutions that we did work with on average, or I should say the 5 institutions that we worked with, on average, their prices for admission or for utilization of the institutions averaged about $10 to $20, and you wouldn't really be saving too much money in paying $75 to $100. But what the Nantucket would offer is admission to cultural institutions beyond just the ones that we worked with. It would be sort of a group effort beyond the cultural corridor to implement this Nantucket on a wider scale, and then paying $75 to $100 would actually be reasonable. Oh, yes. Actually, the in-plan model itself calls for the accounting of inflation and deflation. What the group did was the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics provides something called consumer price indexes that allow for just a quick ratio of division between the consumer price indexes to account for inflation or deflation. And all the data entered into the in-plan model, into the impact calculator, all the data presented here, what did account for inflation and deflation. So these numbers here were presented in 2003 dollars. Absolutely. If you look here, just in straight up 2003 dollars, in 2003, the organization spent $5.4 million. And even though in 2011 dollars, they spent about 8.7, when accounting for deflation, they did spend about 7.1, which was an increase of about $1.6 million in 2003 units between the 5 cultural institutions. Okay, well, I suppose that the whole purpose of trying to quantify the economic contributions of the institutions is for grant-making purposes, policy-making decisions, and especially as a way to advocate to potential donors. Obviously, the cultural institutions rely heavily on outside contributions as well as their fundraising events. And if the cultural institutions have a way to actually show people and show potential donors that, yes, we do influence the local economy positively, they'll have more willingness, I suppose, to contribute to your cause and to contribute to the economy itself. As far as actual data collection, the group did compile all the data into one master Excel file that could be distributed easily between the organizations. It's already the simplified cultural data project form, and all the data can be pulled directly from annual 990 forms and annual reports already conducted by the organizations. Yes?
It sounds like the spreadsheet that you're mentioning is a really great starting point for a broader economic development plan.
Mm-hmm.
That would go beyond the cultural institute.
Okay.
See all of the pathways of influence, direct and indirect.
Right.
I had a moment of insight when we talked about the insurance dollars and my decision which dentist to go to, where it's essentially getting those dollars back
Right.
to the national company, not a dollar.
Well, that's just one case of how even though the cultural institutions do have some off-island expenses, such as your insurance coverage, even though that is paid to an off-island location, it will find its way back onto the island eventually, and that would be a great example of some indirect impacts or some induced impacts, I should say, because it is coverage provided to you by your organization. However, that spending comes back into the economy itself, facilitated by you. Yes? Oh, because such a pass isn't in existence currently, a lot of the discussion revolving around the Nantucket was sort of technical like that. How would it actually work? Would it work only for a certain period of validation, say the third week in July, or would it be sort of like a stamp system where you'd only get 20 stamps to use over the course of the summer? The actual technical details haven't really been figured out, but the purpose of the survey was to gauge an interest in the existence of such a pass. And from the data collected, it does seem that the Nantucket would be a feasible and a pretty good idea to implement in Nantucket. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Right. The whole idea was to gauge interest in the actual idea of a Nantucket, and if interest should be high enough, it should definitely include institutions beyond the cultural corridor, because while they are notable institutions on the island, they're still only a fraction of what Nantucket has to offer. And it would be a pretty good idea to include, many, many institutions beyond just the cultural corridor. Well, I suppose you'd be paying sort of a flat fee. If you have membership to the NHA, I suppose, you wouldn't be paying fees that someone who's a one-time visitor would be paying to the NHA. And what the Nantucket would actually do is, aside from, it wouldn't actually be a full membership, obviously, to all the organizations, but it would allow you a chance to at least see everything that the island has to offer at a low rate. And even if you're a member at X or Y organizations, being able to see all the organizations on the island would allow you to make an informed decision about whether or not you do want to become members at other organizations beyond just the ones that you're already involved in.
Okay, I get to do my spiel about digitisation data again, I guess. Hopefully I've got the order right this time, and we are going to be talking indeed now about the process of digitising records and what that means. Obviously, many of you are aware that everything is being digitised. We want everything to be available on the web, but the process of getting there is pretty long and painful. And so what the next team did was to look at what are the prospects of putting the various records that are available on Nantucket, public records, historical records, other community records. What are some of the ways that that those might be made more readily available to citizens both in Nantucket but also much farther afield? This project was actually sponsored by two organisations, Molly Anderson at the Athenaeum and Catherine Stover at the Town Clerk's office, and they worked with the team behind me, Danielle, Meg and Nick, who are going to tell you about their project. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming. Our project worked towards improving access to records on Nantucket.
I'm Nick.
I'm Megan.
I'm Danielle.
And we were sponsored by the Nantucket Athenaeum and the Town and County Clerk's Office.
So across America, there's an increasing trend of digitization of records. Many communities are experiencing this problem where their records are spread out across multiple organizations in their town, and those records are kept in different forms. Some of these communities are addressing this problem by digitizing their records to make them more accessible.
This is not unlike the situation on Nantucket. Records are spread out between multiple organizations and departments, and they are kept in a variety of forms, from hard copy to microfilm to digitized in databases and available online. Because of this scattered layout, someone looking for genealogical information, for example, would require multiple stops to retrieve a comprehensive list of any desired information. So we developed objectives to achieve our project goal of improving record access. In 1999, the Nantucket Historical Association published a guide to historic and genealogical resources listing records of all relevant organizations on the island. Our objectives consisted of evaluating the location and format of these records and formulating an approach to improving record accessibility and developing a prototype database with which to test and improve upon.
So in reevaluating those 1999 records from the NHA guide, we went around and interviewed a number of organizations on the island and formulated those findings into a table. An excerpt from that table is shown here, showing the holdings of the Nantucket Athenaeum and what form those records are in. As you can see, they hold a number of records in hard copy, microfilm, digitized format, and also online.
So we researched how other communities approach the problem of fragmented records.
Many communities are going with the approach of digitizing their records, and some are working with other organizations in their town to create a collaborative. However, all the cases that we looked at either involved the digitizing of specifically historic records or specifically public records. Hudson River Valley Heritage in New York and Northfield History Collaborative in Minnesota are two examples of history collaboratives. They both partner up with organizations in their area and make available online records related to their local history. The town of Reading has made a lot of progress in digitizing their public records. However, not all of these are available online because of the various legal implications with public records. Okay. This is a screenshot of the Northfield History Collaborative's homepage. Much of our recommendation is based on their successful approach. You're able to search through all of their records just by putting in a keyword on their homepage. And then once you enter that, you're returned with all the records related to your search. And this is hosted on Content DM, which we will talk a little bit briefly about later. The records have been put through OCR, which is optical character recognition, which means that while you're able to see what the actual record looks like, the computer recognizes what words are on that page. So if you search cheese, for example, you'll be returned with Dairies and Creameries of Rice County because cheese appears on that page. Okay. So after gaining a better idea of what exactly the situation is on Nantucket and how other similar communities have approached problems like the one on Nantucket, we came to the conclusion that creating a digital collaborative would be the best approach. As we stated before, records on Nantucket are spread out between multiple organizations, and they're also kept in a bunch of different forms. Creating a digital collaborative would help with this problem because it would, first of all, integrate the records of multiple organizations by putting them together in one online repository. It would also provide a single portal for access to these records, enabling users to have a one-stop shopping experience for Nantucket's records. And because all of these records would be available in one site, users would be made more aware of what records are out there on Nantucket and available to them.
So this image is a representation of the prototype that we have developed. The site acts as a signpost or roadmap. You still have to visit each organization, but the site tells you where to go. For example, Bob wants to look into his family history on the island. He could go to the Nantucket Network, search genealogy, and be directed to the pertinent organizations. In the future, the end goal for the Nantucket Network is for it to act as a digital repository holding the records on its site database. So in this case, Bob would visit the Nantucket Network, complete his search, and be able to retrieve his records directly from the website without having to leave home.
So what purpose does the Nantucket Network website hold right now? Well, first of all, it's a great tool in applying for the grants and then seeking out additional partners to join the collaborative. They can actually demonstrate, here's what we're doing and here's sort of what we're moving towards. In addition to that, the Nantucket Network prototype website serves as a great testing ground for any metadata standards as well as any other techniques that the collaborative decides upon. What is metadata? Metadata is all of the data about a record. For example, a book has metadata such as the title, the author, the publisher, the date, etc. And metadata standards are essentially the form that you fill all of that data into. You want to have fields for all the important information like the title, the date, and the author. But any information that's irrelevant, you don't want to be part of the metadata standard, because if it is, then you will be keeping track of information that no one cares about and spending all your effort cataloging that. So the Nantucket Network right now is, as we said, a prototype interface. It's got our findings listed in it. It's a completely searchable interface. So if you type in keywords such as if you're Bob the genealogist and want to find your family history, you search for genealogy here, and you come up with a list of all the organizations on the island that hold genealogical records and what those records might be. In addition, the Nantucket Network website is filterable, meaning you can go by organization. So if you're looking for the Land Bank Commission's records, for example, you can click their link up top. You come up with a page that looks like this that shows you all of the records held by the Land Bank. In addition, any records that are currently online are linked to from the Nantucket Network website. So land bank property transfer filing forms, which are currently online, have a link that you can click, and as soon as you click that link, you now have access to those records.
So through our research, we have identified key steps that we recommend a collaborative to take. Initially, we suggest that the collaborative acquire grant funds to to perform a feasibility study to determine if such a venture could be successful on Nantucket. If the study concludes that a collaborative would be a success, then we suggest the following steps. Start small. The successful collaboratives that we researched began with selecting 2 to 4 varied organizations to serve as the pilot group. Next, the collaborative should apply for a grant to create a funded project manager position. This person's priority would be ensuring that the digitization process is launched successfully and continues to run smoothly.
The next step would be to come up with a set of metadata standards. And from our example of the book and that metadata, it seems as if it should be a really simple process. But then you've got to consider that you have records such as this map here from 1844, alongside other records such as data sets from the Shellfish Association, as well as books, whaling logs, and all sorts of other records that are held by these organizations. And these records all have a different set of metadata, so it's hard to come up with one standard to put that all into. What we suggest doing, and what many collaboratives in the past have done, is use the Dublin Core metadata standards or a modified set of them, which we don't have time to go into in extreme detail here, but they provide a good unified set of standards for a collaborative venture of many different types of documents. After the metadata standards have been established, priorities are the next step. And the collaborative wants to figure out which records they want to put online first, what would be the most useful for their users, and then they want to start cataloging the metadata of those records. And this metadata should be cataloged, and as we said, can be put up onto the Nantucket Network prototype website, and any issues in the metadata standards or any issues in this whole process can be identified there before the digitization even becomes underway. And that way, before it becomes expensive to fix these errors, they can be caught and corrected. Next, when the digitization starts, there has to be a database management system in place to hold all the records and to provide access to them. And there are multiple ways that you can go about this. For example, the Athenaeum does all of their digitization offsite, and they outsource it to an external company called Olive. Whereas the NHA and the Town County Clerk's Office use InMagic for the NHA and Laserfiche for the Town County Clerk's Office, which are both done in-house, and the digitization is all done here on the island. What we suggest, as stated before, was the Content DM solution, which is much like, it's an in-house solution where the digitization would be done here, and the hosting would be done here, but it provides a great web interface that we showed before with the Northfield website, and it's fully searchable and has a good interface for entering the Dublin Core metadata standards into.
So once this is complete, the next step is to begin digitizing records. If the committee decides to outsource, then this is a matter of sending the records to the hosting company. However, if the committee decides to host on-site, then this is a matter of acquiring the scanning hardware. Throughout this process, the collaborative should be identifying problems and correcting them as they arise. They should be revisiting and reevaluating the metadata standards to ensure continual compatibility. Ultimately, we hope for the collaborative to be self-correcting and evolving. Once the digitization strategy is proven efficient and effective, the collaborative should begin to fold in additional organizations.
So, in conclusion, the situation on Nantucket right now is such that in order to find records that you're looking for, you'd have to visit multiple organizations, whether it be their websites or their physical buildings. The Nantucket Network, which we created, helps by acting as a signpost, directing people to the organizations holding the records that they're looking for. And then in the future, we'd like to end up with a collaborative approach, which would be an online repository which would hold all the records that are allowed to be publicly accessible, so that Bob the genealogist could be sitting at home in his pajamas and go online and search for genealogies and be returned all the relevant records from 3 different organizations. Thank you. Questions?
Currently, the prototype is online, but it's right now I've got it hosted on my own web space. So we're handing it off to the Athenaeum to do what they will with it. I'm not sure what the end goal is. I think it might be an internal use thing for now, but the end goal is eventually, this collaborative that will be online.
Well, one specific collaborative that I looked into was the Hudson River Valley Heritage, which we mentioned briefly. It really depends on the type of organization that you're talking about, because some organizations, well, first of all, you do want to start with not only a small number of organizations, but a small number of collections. So maybe probably just one collection from each organization that's participating. So Hudson River Valley, they combined a college archives, public library, and a historical house museum. The college archives had a digitized collection already, which was just a matter of transferring it from their platform to Content DM. So that took about 4 months. However, so that was done before the other 2 projects were even started, and those each took about a year. So there's not really any way of gauging how long it's going to take, but yeah.
Electronically as much as we are physically knit together. So I appreciate it, and it's been a real pleasure to get to know you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I wanted to say that you are all a credit to your families and your home communities and to your school. And one of the things I think that not only am I interested, and I'm sure I can speak for Ellie and Molly as well, not only are we interested in improving access, but we're interested in improving enthusiasm for these records and to preserve these things. Nothing gives me more pleasure than to have people come to my vaults like you did and see some of the things that we had, and just like you did, go, oh my God. Great. That's what we want. We want that enthusiasm. We want that support. We want to make it available to people and to generate enthusiasm. These are their records. They belong to the people. And I thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks.
too. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on. As many of you know, many of the roads on Nantucket are private roads, and many of them are not in the best condition. And there's been a particular concern for what that means for emergency vehicle access. So the next team, what they did under the supervision of Kara Buzanowski, the director of the DPW, was to develop an evaluation protocol and conduct an evaluation of a sample of some of the worst roads on Nantucket. And they are going to present the results of that evaluation process. They spent an awful lot of time riding their bicycles, courtesy of Harvey, all over the island, and they had a marvellous time doing it. So we have the evaluation of private roads on Nantucket with Rebecca, Maggie, and Ali. Thank you.
Hi, we're the group that work for the Department of Public Works. I'm Maggie Corrigan. This is Rebecca Cox and Ali LaRue. Our project was done because there's a lack of requirements for maintenance on private roads on the island, and that causes surface imperfections and height and width issues on these roads, which makes it really difficult for emergency vehicles to be able to access them.
So the goal of our project was to evaluate the condition of a sample of the private roads here on Nantucket and to make recommendations for the repair and maintenance of these roads in order to ensure the safe passage of emergency vehicles. And we accomplished this goal by completing the following objectives. The first one being to clarify the nature of private roads and concerns about their maintenance. The second being to identify the range of techniques currently used to evaluate private roads. The third being to develop our own evaluation protocol specific to the roads here on Nantucket. The fourth being to actually implement this evaluation protocol here. The fifth being to evaluate the options to bring these roads into compliance. And the sixth was to recommend appropriate strategies and priorities.
So today we're going to be going over who's responsible for the maintenance and repair of these private roads with a little bit of background on Nantucket. We'll go over our evaluation and how we determined prioritization and cost estimates in the Access database we developed. From our findings, we'll go over the road prioritization and the total cost for road repair and other issues we found with the roads, and our recommendations and summary and acknowledgements. The responsibility of the maintenance and repair of the private roads falls to the landowners and abutters. This means that if damage occurs to a vehicle on a private road due to the condition of the private road, the landowners have to pay for it. In Massachusetts, a town does not have any responsibility to maintain or repair the private roads unless the town is a major shareholder of the proprietor road. By law, a town is allowed to develop their own protocol for the extent of the town's involvement concerning the private roads. This is a GIS map of Nantucket showing the town-owned roads versus the privately owned roads. The town-owned roads are shown in green and the privately owned roads are shown in brown. And you can see that there's a lot more private roads on Nantucket than there are town. 78% of the roads on Nantucket are either privately owned or have undetermined ownership. And since the town has no responsibility in maintaining or repairing them, there's no system in place to evaluate the private roads. The cost for maintaining these roads is so high that the town is reluctant to take over the responsibility. And all of the issues with the Nantucket private roads have hindered the response time of emergency vehicles, and it will continue to do so if not addressed.
And in order to complete our project, we surveyed 38 private roads on Nantucket, as seen on this map. What we did was we made a road summary sheet to get an idea of the general problems with the road, and then we had the unpaved road condition survey, which outlined the segments. We looked at the surface condition based on 4 different categories. We looked at the loose aggregate, or sand and dirt on the roads. We looked at the potholes on the roads and the corrugations, which are the big roller coasters going across the entire road, and rutting from tires as well. We judged each of these problems based on their severity and the extent of the problem. We looked at the width of the roads, which is a major concern for the fire trucks being able to get through. They wanted 16 feet wide on straightaways and 20 feet wide around corners. They also wanted 14 feet of overhead clearance in order for the trucks to be able to get through. After we did these surveys, we determined the priority based on 6 different factors. We looked at the surface condition from our survey before and separated it into 4 categories to give a rating value. We had a rating value of 0 if there was no issue, 1, if it was passable, 2, if it was an increased response time, and 3, if it was just completely impassable due to surface condition. We looked at the width based on those same 4 categories, and if the road was less than 10 feet wide, we considered that impassable because the fire trucks are 10 feet wide and they wouldn't be able to fit. When we looked at overhead clearance, we just classified it as passable or impassable, and if it was less than 14 feet of overhead clearance, the trucks wouldn't be able to get through. The total residential volume is the number of houses on the road. We separated those into 4 categories based on how many houses there were. And the year-round residential volume was one of our most important factors and was weighted higher than some of the others because it was the actual use of the road based on how many houses on the road were full-time residents. And then we looked at other importance factors, which was another major factor, another factor that was weighted higher than the others. We looked at whether or not the road was a connector road between 2 major roads, and whether or not there were multiple side streets coming off of the road that needed to be accessed from that, and if there was beach access or any other landmark coming off of the road. We added those together in order to get a priority value for each road as a whole. And then we took the roads and estimated the cost. We looked at the types of repair that would be needed, like grading or filling in potholes, and we gave those ideas to the Department of Public Works. And they provided us with a unit cost to hire a private contractor to come in and fix each road. And we took those unit costs and calculated them and made them into an actual cost, an estimate to fix the road.
In order to organize all of this data, we created an access database that the town would be able to use in the future to extend upon, seeing as we only did the 38 roads and there's a lot more on Nantucket. The database has 2 front-end data entry forms, the problem road list and the unpaved road condition survey. The problem road list covers everything in the road summary sheet that Maggie talked about, and the unpaved road condition survey covers the evaluation matrix we used out on the roads. All the data entered in these forms goes into tables, and then queries can be run due to calculations that will update the database.
As Maggie mentioned earlier, during our time here on Nantucket, we evaluated 38 of the private roads. As you can see on the map, the roads that we evaluated are highlighted in blue. These are roads that were given to us by the fire department as known problem areas on the island. However, there are 580 total private roads on Nantucket, and thus this is a very small sample of the roads. We use these 38 roads to pilot the evaluation protocol that we developed, and we so to pilot it, because we didn't have time here in the 7 weeks that we were here to evaluate all of the roads. We went out and we evaluated all of the roads using our evaluation protocol, and this is a summary of the data that we found. The black bars are the maximum width rating value that we gave each road, and then the blue ones are for surface condition. As you can see, a majority of the roads we gave a level 3 rating value, which rendered the road impassable. In fact, 29 out of the 38 roads that we evaluated were found to be impassable at some point on the road due to either surface condition, width, or both of those criteria. After we evaluated all the roads and collected all of the data, we added all of the rating values together to prioritize the roads. And this is a table of the top 10 prioritized roads. As you can see, Cato Lane is number 1 for priority, scoring a 20.97 out of a possible 21.97 on our priority scale. After determining priority, we calculated costs to repair each of the roads based on what Maggie talked about earlier. And these are meant to be ballpark estimates. They are not exact values because we don't have the expertise nor the time to go out and evaluate each road specifically for cost estimates. These are meant to be ballpark estimates so that you can kind of see which roads are the most expensive and an estimate as to how much it'll cost to fix. So our estimates range from $1,000 to approximately $79,000, with the median being $10,000 and the average being approximately $14,000. During our time here, we also observed some other issues with the private roads that would hinder the response time of emergency vehicles. And one of the big issues that we found was houses having incorrect addresses. The addresses that the houses had did not reflect the road that they were accessed from. An example of this was in the area of Tom Nevers that we evaluated. The arrow there is pointing to a house that has an address of Norwood Road. However, you can't access the house from Norwood Road. You have to access it from Wiltshire Avenue, which is a couple of roads down from Norwood. Norwood Road only extends a couple hundred feet down from Tom Nevers Road, which is the main road. And thus, if the emergency response personnel was unaware of this problem, they may try to go down Norwood Road, and then they would have to spend time turning around or backing back down the road, which could waste precious time when you're responding to an emergency.
After collecting and analyzing all of our data, we have several recommendations for the town. Our first recommendation is that the town develops a short-term strategy and a timeline to fix the roads that are top priority. Even though the town has no responsibilities in the maintenance or repair of the roads, in case of public safety and with the Board of Selectmen's approval, they are allowed to go in and enforce the repair. Our second recommendation is that the town reach out to the homeowners and the homeowners associations and educate them on their responsibilities. They can do this through the brochure we created, or reaching out to the Civic League and contacting insurance companies. Our third recommendation is that the town work with the homeowners association, the fire department, and the Roads and Ways of Way Committee to ensure that they understand their responsibilities with the maintenance and upkeep of private roads. A lot of the older roads on Nantucket don't have a maintenance schedule, so we recommend that they be maintained at least 2 times a year. Our fourth recommendation is that the DPW continue to use the protocols in the database we developed in order to continue to evaluate and prioritize roads. There's a lot of other roads out there that we noticed while we were out and about that aren't at the level they should be for the fire department. And our fifth and final recommendation is that the town develops a strategy to correct the inaccuracies in the address data. Like Becca was saying, there's a lot of addresses that are wrong, and out in the private roads, there's not a lot of street signs.
We would really like to thank the DPW, especially Kara, for taking the time to help us with our project, and the fire department, especially Bob Bates, for coming out and showing us around and helping us identify which roads to survey. We would also like to thank the Mariah Mitchell Association for letting us stay at Hinchman House, and Harvey Young for providing us with bikes so we could get around and do all these surveys. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Probably, if there is a problem, they will have to pay out an incredible amount of money. So that's number one. Number two, does the town have any liability issues regarding that? If they can't access these homes because they're mislisted or something with the addresses, and they're doing their best. I mean, our guys are fantastic. You say you walk someplace and the 911 system says you're there, and they can find you. But if there are any liability issues with the town, or they could accuse the town of not being responsible or something like that, and also
So we haven't looked into, specifically into the insurance issue. We didn't look and see if the insurance companies are aware of the problem, but that was one of our recommendations, to approach the insurance companies to say, hey, this is a problem, and kind of use it as an incentive for the homeowners to repair the roads. And then for the second question, okay. The town is not liable. We researched some of the Massachusetts state's laws, and if the whoever has the responsibility to repair the road in cases of like that being a hindrance to response time, then that is the owner of the road's fault, and they need to pay for the damages. And also, as far as the incorrect addresses go, that's also the homeowner's responsibility. So.
Basically had to do with, can the town be proactive in establishing bylaws and things that will both compel homeowners or developers to make sure that these roads are accessible and to mandate that these homeowners keep the roads accessible?
The state of Massachusetts, as we had mentioned, they do allow the town to develop their own bylaws based on how much they want to work with the private roads. So yes, that is an option to create a bylaw as to how much. And now, as new roads are being developed, there are more strict requirements for maintenance and development than there were when a lot of the roads that we're looking at were developed. These are the older private roads that didn't have those requirements when they were developed. So, yes.
I'm just thinking, let's say I moved into a neighborhood that was on this list in Pasco Road. I wouldn't necessarily the homeowner know about it. And I'm just wondering if the fire department of the town has a way of making that information known to these various places. For instance, you said 29 of the 38 roads are not passable. So just as a homeowner, is there any way that is the fire department concerned about this or getting this information out, or do they let them know, hey, you have fire in your house, you may not be able to get down that road?
Well, one of the things we
Do you have something to say about that?
I used to work in the planning office, and there's a document in the planning office which is right next door at True Fairgrounds Road, which actually accesses off of Old South. And the address is not listed. Why is there a number 4 for this structure, which is 4 Fairgrounds Road? But anyway, there's a document in the public office that's available for people to come in and see whether or not their road is private or public. And I will also say, I wish that my street, Gulfview Drive, was listed on one of your lists, because
We
I'm
talked about it
on
in the paper,
level
right?
4 street.
Yeah.
Level 3 being.
We actually we went to Farmview Road, so we went off of Gulfview, and when we were there, we were just like, wait, like this should be. Why isn't this on the list as well? Like.
Generally speaking, those opposite views live in the same house.
Yeah, they actually. And.
Dominic?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. We definitely had some issues finding. Well, sometimes the fire department will get down there and they have to call the DPW to pull them out because they get the truck stuck. But a lot of times, it's just hopefully they can make it. Yeah. Yes.
It sounds like the data that you've collected would be worth integrating with the town GIS system. And it sounds like it would be a fairly easy thing to do, at least to have the information there. And I was also thinking that, going back to the earlier presentation on improving access to public and historic records, it might be nice to think of a little module that would allow people to type in the name of their road and ask for any information that they might want to know about it be brought up, such as you research your ancestry and find out surprising things about it, some things you don't know and should know, and perhaps some things you wish you hadn't found out.
The database that we've created actually allows people to go in and search for a road, so it would just be making that accessible to the people, to the public. And we use Google Maps to kind of map out the roads and the problem areas, so it would be interesting to look into the GIS system as well.
And I'm pretty sure that can be converted relatively easily. We have everything into Google Earth now, and it shows each individual road and then which sections have problems with width or surface condition. So that could definitely be something that could be transferred into the town GIS later on.
Do you have a question? Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understood you. One of your opening comments was that abutters are responsible if vehicles are injured or damaged on their road. I did not know that.
Yes, they have to pay for the maintenance of, or the fixing of the, yeah.
Yeah, it's a Massachusetts law.
Mm-hmm. And they need, one of the more interesting things is they need the 50% approval of the abutters in order to even consider fixing these roads. So sometimes the town needs 50%. And sometimes they'll plan out a project, have all the funding, and then they won't get the 50% approval because people want to keep it and they don't want more traffic on the roads. So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the Tom Nevers slide for 27 Norwood, obviously in the time since I was caretaker and left directions on how the hell to get there, that no longer exists on the police file system for that address. Because at one time it did. And then the other section, the other comment is about that section of Tom Nevers. Those are all dirt roads, and I noticed it was not on the priority list, and it's not on the priority list because each of those roads has a very active abutters group individually who take care of those roads and maintain them and grade them
Yeah.
once a year, which I think is a lesson in itself.
Mm-hmm.
That, private roads, private ownership, and a lot of neighborhood responsibility.
Yeah, if the roads are properly maintained, then regular maintenance shouldn't be very difficult at all. Once they're brought into compliance, twice a year, just grading over and doing some regular brush cutting will take care of most of the problems.
Right, I think in those areas, we live on Exeter Street, which is, I think maybe 15 years ago, we abutters put in maybe $15,000 or $20,000 on the road. I think it's probably not even a quarter of a mile long. And since then, we maintain a small fund, which essentially just takes care of basic maintenance after that initial investment.
Yeah, in this section of Tom Nevers, a lot of the issue with the roads wasn't necessarily the surface and the width. Those were usually actually pretty good. It was more of the address issues that we were finding in Tom Nevers.
And the width on some of them.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so to our last presentation, one that many people on the island may have heard about already because the team's been all over the place asking questions and doing surveys. And many people think of this as sort of a joke when they hear about a dog park, but actually it's quite a serious project and they've done a great job collecting lots of data. which they will present. They've been working with the Richard Ray on the Board of Health and Sandra Welsh, and many people have expressed quite an interest in this project. So if the girls want to come forward, it's Tara, Dominique and Sarah who will tell you all about their project. Thank you.
Okay, so hi everyone. We're the group of WPI students working on the Nantucket Dog Park project. We've been on the island for 7 weeks working with the Nantucket Board of Health, working to see whether Nantucket should establish a dog park on the island. I'm Tara.
I'm Sarah. And I'm Dominique.
And our sponsor, as I said, is the Nantucket Board of Health. We've been working closely with the director of the Board of Health, Richard Ray, as well as Sandra Welsh. So the overall goal of our project was to determine the desirability, feasibility, and design options of a fenced-in dog park on the island. Throughout this presentation, we're going to go over such things as what a dog park is, what the issues are in the United States and Nantucket regarding dogs, why Nantucket would want to build a dog park, what some of the hidden benefits of a dog park are, what we did, what we recommend now, and our conclusions.
So what is a dog park? A dog park is defined by the American Kennel Club as a public park, typically fenced, where dogs and their people can play together. And these are some pictures of various dog parks from around the United States with a variety of features ranging from very simplistic to very complex. Now, the average park ranges from half an acre to 15 acres, with the most common being around 2. And every park has different features, management structures, and financial strategies. Most parks have more than just a field and a fence. They have water places for dogs, separate fencing areas, and even informational boards for more information. Most dog parks do have trash receptacles and waste bags to ensure proper ownership and maintenance of the park. Depending on location and neighbors, most parks have lighting for after sunset use. This is especially helpful in the winter months after the sun's gone down and work is still not out. Some parks have agility equipment and even and some other parks would never even consider such features. Every feature in every park is a byproduct of what that community wants and what that community needs. So that's why there's such a wide range in the United States. Now, some parks have become more than a mere location. They have become places for puppy classes, vaccination clinics, and even dog dress-up events. And they're great ways of fundraising, education, and community bonding. So some parks are more than just a location. They're actually an essential part of their community.
All right, so what are the issues? In the United States, there are over 78 million owned dogs, and they can produce around 10 million tons of waste each year. And just 1 gram of this waste can contain around 23 million fecal coliform bacteria. The waste can also contain E. coli, Cryptosporidium, Giardia, Salmonella, and roundworms. And coming in contact with any of these can be very harmful for your health. Specifically on Nantucket, the Board of Health is worried about water quality. And according to conservationists on island, about 10% of water pollution can be attributed to dog waste, as owners don't always pick up after their dogs. And a dog park could alleviate this issue through educational means. Also along the lines of dog waste, we're worried about beaches where waste can be left and people can step in it or it can get into the harbor. We're worried about piping plovers on the beaches and their nesting habits, because dogs can actually leave scent or physical trails that feral cats and crows can lead them directly to their prey. Also, Nantucket is in the top 3 counties for Lyme disease, meaning that there are a lot of deer ticks on island, and dogs often encounter these ticks. Lastly, we're worried about the safety of dogs during hunting season.
Okay, so why build a dog park? We believe that the biggest benefit for the Nantucket community would be education. A park would be a place where the public could see how others take care of their dogs. A simple informational board could help educate owners on such dog-related issues as the effects of dog waste, the conservation efforts involving the coastal birds, and tick prevention for both pets and people. After polling dog owners, we found that the majority were interested in the socialization aspects of a dog park. A dog park could be a place where dogs are given the opportunity to become more comfortable around other dogs as well as people. The fenced-in dog park would also be an enclosed area where Nantucketers and island visitors can bring their dogs to safely run off-leash. It virtually removes any fear of the dogs running away, darting in front of a car, or becoming involved in a hunting accident. Finally, we would think that the community would foster a greater sense of unity, and it would actually help the older generation. A fenced-in dog park would probably be set on a relatively flat, well-kept piece of land and provide benches for resting. And so the older generation would be encouraged to go outside and exercise their dogs as well. There are also some hidden benefits of a dog park. First, it would promote responsible dog ownership. Dog owners would be encouraged to exercise and socialize their dogs, and hopefully the park would help them develop habits such as picking up after their dogs and allowing their dogs to run off leash in appropriate areas. This graph depicts the community's response to one of our survey questions. In this particular question, respondents were asked whether they felt comfortable with off-leash dogs on Nantucket. Not surprisingly, 56% of dog owners agreed or strongly agreed that they felt comfortable, but 48% of non-dog owners, which is represented by the orange bars, dog owners are represented by the blue. But so 48% of the non-dog owners felt uncomfortable or very uncomfortable with off-leash dogs. So you can see that there's a very large disconnect. When about half of dog owners feel comfortable with off-leash dogs, about half of non-dog owners feel uncomfortable. So a dog park could provide a place where owners can bring their dogs and let them legally run off-leash, and it could reduce the number of instances where their dogs are running off-leash in places they shouldn't be, such as in town. Also, socialized dogs tend to be less aggressive, and studies have shown that dogs that receive an adequate amount of exercise are less likely to engage in unfavorable activities, such as barking and digging.
So how did we determine what Nantucket wants? Well, we surveyed 361 community members, both in person and through self-administered surveys. We had two different surveys developed, one for dog owners and one for non-dog owners to be distributed accordingly. We spent the first 3 weeks on Nantucket surveying in person outside of Stop and Shop, Tuppence Links, Sanford Farms, and the Steamship Authority. Meanwhile, we had over 1,000 copies printed, which we personally distributed to the public schools at the elementary, middle, and high school level. We also had surveys put up at the Offshore Animal Hospital and Geronimo's, and we collected those frequently. As an added bonus, we had an online survey created, which we then put on the town website, Geronimo's Facebook page, and the animal shelter website, along with other online locations. While we were collecting this raw data, we also took the time to speak with 21 prominent community members regarding dog issues on the island. We spoke with local conservationists regarding water quality and endangered species. We spoke with health professionals regarding the safety of both dogs and humans. And we spoke with the local officer on animal control regarding common occurrences around the island, as well as a slew of other professionals local to Nantucket.
All right, so from our surveys, we found, as you can see from the dog owner graph being blue and the non-dog owner being orange, that there's an overwhelming majority of people who would be in favor of a fenced-in dog park on Nantucket. And when we combined the data, we found that 77% of Nantucketers would be in favor of a fenced-in dog park. And of that 77%, we looked at the free response answers, and we found the most common ones for the people in favor, they like the idea that the dogs would have freedom at the park and their dogs could be socialized with other dogs. Of the 23% opposed, they claim that it would be unnecessary and that there's already enough space. However, this is not true because there are no designated off-leash areas for dogs to play on island yet.
Okay, so this is a graph also showing the responses to one of our survey questions. Here, respondents were asked whether they believed failure to dispose of dog waste properly posed a threat to human health. As you can see from the graph, both dog owners and non-doggers agreed that it did pose a health threat. 50% of dog owners agreed or strongly agreed, and 62% of non-dog owners agreed or strongly agreed. And so while dog owners show a little less concern, the majority of both groups understand that undisposed of dog waste can pose a serious health threat. Here's another graph showing another one of our survey questions. Here, respondents were asked whether they felt most Nantucket dog owners act responsibly in picking up after their pets. They somewhat agreed, however, 37% of dog owners felt neutral on the topic, and 35% of non-dog owners felt neutral on the topic as well. And so while they feel dog owners are relatively responsible, there's some definite room for improvement, and things aren't so bad that they can't get better. This also demonstrates another example of how a dog park could serve as an educational tool for the community. Here you can see that dog owners and non-dog owners agreed the hunting season poses a threat to the safety of dogs. In fact, 55% of dog owners strongly agreed that it posed a serious threat. Even people that we surveyed and interviewed told us that they put orange jackets on their dogs to protect them during the hunting season. So as you can imagine, hunting season is a very real concern on the island.
When we talked to the dog owners through the surveys, we asked them which elements they thought were very important to a dog park, and the number one response was a parking lot. So that's very important to consider. Water fountains for dogs actually ranked second, with trees coming in third. Benches, trails, and water fountains for people came in fourth, fifth, and sixth place, respectively. Now, while all of these elements are important to consider as they are important to the residents of Nantucket, further consideration needs to be had once things come along. No. We looked at several different surfacing options. Maybe.
Let's just keep going without the presentation.
No. Can you just click? Oh, it's on the screen? All right, well, we have several different surfacing options that we looked at based on our previous research and from other professionals in park creation and dog recreation. The most common around the country that we found was grass. However, this does get muddy quite easily. But it is one of the most popular ones, which a lot of parks actually have two separate areas for dogs. One is not used while the other is in use, so the grass can grow and they can switch them off. Yay! This is a possibility for Nantucket, but again, it depends on potential space allotment. Other parks, such as the one in Falmouth, use pea stone surfacing, which is actually the most sanitary option, and dogs would not get nearly as dirty. Again, further consideration must be considered, but both of these would basically eliminate the risk of getting ticks in the dog park. For fencing, we looked at split post, chain link, and split rail, and all of these are possibilities at this point. The most common around the U.S. was chain link fence. However, split post was also used possibly for aesthetic reasons. These would need to be thought about further.
Another important factor in a dog park is where it is located, and with the Board of Health being worried about water quality, you wouldn't want it near any water sources or beaches. Also, it should be kept away from neighbors, as we wouldn't want it to be a disturbance with barking and stuff like that. Also, it should be in an area where it wouldn't be disturbing any wildlife.
We looked at several different management models. In consideration is a volunteer-based Friends of the Nantucket Dog Park structure, town-run, or even privately run. Ideally, we would have a volunteer-based organization with donations as to funding. However, if that was not possible, town or private funding or management could work. However, this would involve taxes or fees, respectively. It is important to note that 42% of our samples said that they would not pay for a dog park, which makes the Friends of the Nantucket Dog Park the best option. Again, if that's not possible, it was 37% who said they'd pay at least $10 for a dog park.
All right, and to conclude our findings, we found that there's overwhelmingly strong support from both dog owners and non-dog owners. We know of suitable locations for a dog park. The park would serve as a social function for both permanent and seasonal residents. However, it's important to note that just a dog park won't fix all the problems we talked about earlier, but it will serve as an educational tool for the public.
And based on all of our research and findings, we came up with a set of recommendations. First, we recommend the community pursue the establishment of a fenced-in dog park on the island. Next, we recommend that a set of interested individuals form and that this group be comprised of volunteers just to remove any biases or anything. And then this group should go on to explore suitable land parcels, determine desirable design elements and options, develop cost estimates, and evaluate funding and management options.
Overall, there are overwhelming educational benefits attached to creating a dog park. 77% of our sample said they were in favor of the idea of a fenced-in dog park. Depending on management model, it could be partly or even wholly self-sustaining. And regardless, we do need a group of dedicated community members to move this project forward. Any questions?
What wildlife would be disturbed, since it seems to be rats, mice, rabbits, and deer? We can do without the deer.
It's mainly the grounding birds that we're worried about, like the piping plovers and the least terns.
But we're not addressing the issue of the feral cats, which are probably the main predator.
Well, as we said earlier, the dogs, just even being off leash, if they come into contact with the nest, the feral cats can track that later and, again, to form of predation.
I would like to thank these three wonderful young people. This is my first foray into the WPI program. It's been here for quite some time. But I have not been a participant. Thanks to these three lovely young ladies, I certainly have gotten an education. They have taken the seeds for something and may see it come to fruition on this island. It's been very exciting to work with all three of them. What none of these kids know is that following the Christmas break, we're going to bring them all back. And we're going to spend the winter here completing a little bit more work on all of them. This has been that rewarding, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.